All right, we can probably go ahead and get started. I see people are still starting to roll in a little bit, but we are going to go ahead and get started with our webinar today. So thank you everyone for joining us, and welcome to the Clean Water Wednesday webinar series. We're excited to be able to offer these webinars to our monitors, friends, and clean water community as a chance to learn about clean water issues and stay connected. I'm Zach Moss. I'm the Midwest Save Our Streams Coordinator with the Isaac Walton League of America. And before we get started, we have just a few little housekeeping items to review before I turn things over to our presenters. So first of all, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording should be available on the Isaac Walton League YouTube channel soon, in the next day or two. So keep an eye on our website at iwla.org for that recording and for updates on that, and also to see updates about upcoming webinars. Secondly, if you have a question during the presentations, you should have a little question box in the control panel that you can type those into. And we'll also have a Q&A session at the end. So I'll be moderating questions in the background while Emily and Melissa present. And if there are questions at the end, then we can bring those up to the group. I could also be answering some of them, just typing directly back to you. That's something that I can answer. So the webinar today should run about an hour, more or less, including time for question and answer at the end. Today we are joined by Emily Bialowas, Chesapeake Monitoring and Outreach Program Coordinator. She works with me at the Isaac Walton League, and we'll also be joined by Melissa Atwood, the Outreach Coordinator of Fairfax County Wastewater Management. Emily and Melissa are gonna walk you through the history of wastewater management, talking about lessons learned, current challenges, and goals for the future. Emily is going to be our first presenter. She'll start us off with a basic introduction to the topic of wastewater, and then Melissa will follow up with some more specific experiences and lessons learned from her perspective with Fairfax County Wastewater Management. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton over to Emily to get us started.
Thank you, Zach.
Yeah.
Zach, try control of my screen. Can you see that?
What?
You can see my screen. Great.
So
okay.
I'm gonna turn the camera and mute myself, but I'll be in the background answering questions.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So today we're talking about wastewater, which for the Isaac Walton League's Clean Water Program is slightly out of our wheelhouse. We talk a lot about stream health and ecology, but wastewater is a really important part of that because we live next to all of these streams and rivers that we release our wastewater into. My background on this is that before I had this job at the Isaac Walton League, I worked for the Bureau of Environmental Services, which is euphemistic for the wastewater department for the city of Portland, Oregon, and I was an education assistant there. So I talked to kids not just about stream health and stormwater, but also about wastewater, and for them to understand everything that was going down their drains and where it went and how it was treated. So that's my level of understanding. I'm good at explaining it to 5th and 6th graders, but a lot of people are starting really at zero as far as it comes to knowing about wastewater. So I feel good about talking to you about it today. And any really technical questions, I think we can direct to Melissa. So wastewater in the US, by the numbers, we have approximately 16,000 municipal wastewater treatment plants in this country that serve 75% of our population. A lot of those are more urban or suburban areas. Those plants treat between 32 and 34 billion gallons of water every single day. So they have to handle a lot of capacity, and that also tells you how much wastewater we create every single day. And about 20% of US homes are in septic systems. We're not going to talk about septic systems today, but it is important as far as knowing about water quality and how water quality in your area may be affected. If you live in a particularly rural area where most people are in septic systems, that could really significantly be affecting your groundwater and your surface water quality. A little bit of history. I said 18th and 19th century, but I think it goes a little bit before that. The best things to do for managing wastewater were cesspits or cesspools and having open sewers. That meant you either let wastewater out into a pit or pool and let it settle, or you put wastewater into an open sewer that flowed into a local waterway. It wasn't the best for human health, but it was better than other options. A lot of wastewater history is about protecting human health from waterborne diseases. Then moving forward, we started piping that wastewater to pipe it directly into local waterways. That kept us protected from the diseases of an open sewer. Or we also put all of the wastewater and the sludge that goes along with wastewater to places called sewage farms, and that euphemistically was a place to be able to spread wastewater across fields to basically fertilize fields. We still do things like this today, but after the wastewater has been managed a bit more. And then our modern times, in 1972, the Clean Water Act was passed, and a lot of municipalities had to comply and start treating their wastewater if they weren't treating it already before they released it into their local waterways. Also at this time, there were a lot of grants that were put out so that those municipalities could build their wastewater treatment plants. And moving towards today, we're thinking about more and more treatments, which always cost more money, that can filter and treat our wastewater more so that it is not affecting the waterway once we release it back into the local ecosystem. So this is the classic wastewater treatment process. And I'm going to go through each of these. So the primary treatment process is physical removal. One more comment just about this is that this is a very straightforward looking diagram, but if you look at an overhead shot of a wastewater treatment plant, these are big, either closed tanks or open pools, and they take up a large area and they often zigzag around. So this is just a more linear view of that. So it might take a little more to follow what's going on in reality on the ground. So primary treatment is physical removal. And this also can be the pre-treatment. So there are screens removing large debris. There's sand and grit removal, especially if your stormwater is going into your wastewater treatment plant. Things like rocks and stones might end up in the wastewater treatment plant, so they need to be removed. And then there are basically large tanks where the wastewater is left to sit for a while, and the solids settle out to the bottom, the sludge settles out to the bottom, and there are often scrapers on the top to remove greases and oils and anything that floats to the top of the water. So it's using basic physics to remove a lot of the contaminants to the wastewater. The secondary treatment is a little more, I want to say, scientific. So there's biological processes to further remove sludge particles, And that means basically microorganisms are eating those up. This part of the process removes between 85 and 90% of the organic matter, so we're pretty good coming out of secondary. Also, the wastewater is aerated to reoxygenate the water. If you have learned about any water quality issues with us, you know that oxygen, dissolved oxygen in the water is really important to healthy streams and healthy rivers. So that aeration process is important. And then there's also a disinfection portion where either the water is chlorinated or there's UV light used to disinfect it, and that is meant to remove bacteria, both the bacteria that could still be existing in the rest of the wastewater, or sometimes the bacteria that was used in that biological process to remove more of those particles. And I just want to mention for a moment the sludge you see that is filtered out here. That is a waste management process in itself of where that goes and how that's managed. Some places use that as manure spread in agricultural fields. Other places dry that out and remove it that way. But different wastewater treatment plants are going to treat their wastewater differently depending on where they are, if they're in a more urban area or a more rural area. And that is kind of a theme throughout wastewater that you might see. No two wastewater treatment plants are going to be exactly the same. There are a few different ways to come to these different steps of the treatment process. So it's a number of combinations that are possible, particularly given the needs of that municipality. And then lastly, although now sometimes there's a quaternary treatment, which would be a fourth treatment, there's a tertiary treatment. So not all wastewater treatment plants have this. Almost all have the primary and secondary treatment in the US. And there's different potential processes here, like I was saying. There could be chemicals or bacteria used to coagulate, to basically clump up the different little bits of particles that are left. There could be a sand filtration process where the wastewater is pushed through sand. There could be synthetic membranes. And these are used to target all different things like nutrients, which I know if you're concerned about water quality, you know that nitrogen and phosphorus can be a major issue. Pathogens, turbidity, meaning how much stuff is still swirling in the water, or maybe even heavy metals. So this part of the process could be used for a number of different things. The key thing to note with our wastewater treatment plants is that they're almost all initially designed to deal with human waste, human bodily waste, and human bodily waste alone. All of the other things that can end up in our water, that tends to not be the target of our wastewater treatment. And it's going to be in this tertiary or other processes where those are targeted. One other thing I want to note that can really make a big difference for your particular wastewater treatment plant is what kind of sewer system you have. So if you have a combined sewer system or a separate sewer system, it can make a big difference to understanding how your water is treated and to understanding how it affects your waterway. Typically in older cities, this is my understanding, there's going to be a combined sewer system. That means that both the stormwater sewers, so the sewers you see on the curb outside your house or your building, that's the storm sewer, that sewer goes into the same pipes as the pipes going to the sewage treatment plant. That's not always bad. In dry weather, it's fine. But during a storm, that storm drain can overwhelm that system, and there's basically a bypass pipe that's just going to be an outfall pipe that would put water out to your water body without being treated, because the sewage treatment plant is overwhelmed by the wet weather. So there are, in a separate sewer systems, there's going to be totally separate pipes for the pipes that are coming out of your home going to, or business going to a sewage treatment plant, and the pipes that go to your local waterway, which would be the storm sewer. Those tend to be newer. Often it can be a lot of money to retrofit that and basically build a new system. So a lot of older cities have that combined sewer overflow system, and newer places have that separate system. There are differences, cost and time. So I wanted to talk about this. I know there's not a ton on this slide, but it can be kind of a challenge to find out about your local wastewater treatment. It can take a little bit of snooping. So some things to think about are, who do you pay your water bills to? That's often you're paying for not just where your drinking water is coming from, but also for your wastewater management. So that's a good way to find out. That tells you who is managing your wastewater, but not necessarily which plant it is going to. So you can then, based on knowing what department or what agency manages your wastewater, you can find out about the different local wastewater treatment plants. It can take a little bit of Googling. I was saying to Melissa and Zach that before this, I was looking for information about my wastewater treatment plant and where my wastewater goes. I live in Bethesda, Maryland, which is in Montgomery County, Maryland. And if I just search, Maryland wastewater treatment, I won't necessarily get the right answer, because the Montgomery County wastewater is part of a greater DC metro area water and sewer department. So by doing a little Googling, I was able to find out that most of the Montgomery County wastewater where I live goes to the large DC, I believe it's called Blue Plains wastewater treatment plant. And you can find out if your wastewater treatment plant is, what treatments they're doing. A really good thing to do, Melissa, she gives tours at the wastewater treatment plant she works at in Fairfax County. But it's really interesting to take a tour. Something else you can do, although it can get a little down in the weeds, is look for the NPDES permits that either the EPA issues or that your state issues for the EPA. This link that I have here will get you there for your state. NPDES is the National Pollution Discharge something permit, but it's basically all wastewater treatment plants need to be permitted to discharge. There are other industrial sources that also need NPDES permits, but you can look for your wastewater treatment plant and find their permit. And you can read through the permit, and it can be a little technical, but you can see what amounts of different contaminants they've measured for what they're putting out in their effluent or the outflow into their waste, into the waterway. So you can compare that to, if you're doing water quality monitoring, you can look at how those affect each other. Also, wastewater treatment plants need to be aware of local TMDLs. Those are total maximum daily loads. that a municipality or a state is responsible for. So that could be something like sediment. If there's too much stuff floating in the water, it could be something like nitrogen, where if they continue to fail to comply with that, they might have to spend money for a new type of treatment. So this can be pretty complicated, and if you have more questions about it, we can help you work it out. These are pretty localized issues. Like I was saying, different wastewater treatment plants have their different processes for different things. They have different budgets as far as to what they can spend their money on. So it is often a pretty local issue. And it's not as publicized as it could or should be. But it takes some poking around, but you can learn about your wastewater treatment plant. These were the basics of wastewater, and Melissa is going to take us more in depth into the plant that she works at, which can give you a better idea of what happens on a local level. That's all I got, Zach. I think I'm gonna hand it over.
All right, gonna get Melissa in charge here. Give me a minute. There we go. All right, Melissa, we can see your webcam.
Excellent.
Station. Take it away.
Okay. So good afternoon. I'm Melissa Atwood. I am the outreach coordinator for Fairfax County Wastewater Management. And today I'm going to go through a little bit about what how our wastewater processes can relate to water quality, and looking at what Fairfax County Wastewater Management does in order to protect, restore, and enhance the environment. Let's see. Maybe. All right. So first thing, a little bit about Fairfax County Wastewater Management to start us off. So like Emily said, there are quite a few differences in all the different treatment plants and treatment processes, wastewater management in general. So this is Fairfax County's. We have about 349 employees that work to maintain the wastewater infrastructure for our collections and treatment processes. This includes about $200 billion in infrastructure assets. So that's all of the things that they're protecting. Wastewater management program is a service fee enterprise with $284 million a year in operational debt and capital budget. So Fairfax County produces about 100 million gallons a day of wastewater, and this comes from its 372,000 customers. We have 3,300 miles of pipe and 64 pump stations that collect and convey wastewater through 4 regional advanced treatment plants and 1 of our own. So the map that you see on the left-hand side there with the different colors, that shows you, if, like Emily was talking about, looking where your wastewater goes to. So this map can show you that the different colors, if you live in that region, that's where your wastewater will be conveyed to. That's the treatment plant that it actually goes to from your area. So the Nomen M. Cole Junior Pollution Control Plant is the only county-owned wastewater treatment plant in Fairfax County. It's in Lorton, Virginia. It was formerly known as the Lower Potomac Treatment Plant. It was established in 1970. So at the time when it was established in 1970, it only provided primary and secondary treatment. So today, if you take a tour of the Nomen Cole plant or you take a look at how it works, it actually has 4 processes. We do have primary, secondary, advanced, and final treatment before our water is discharged into Pohick Creek. We operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, treating the wastewater generated from that southern part, the pink area on your map, there of Fairfax County. We treat about 40 million gallons a day here. So perspective-wise, 40 million gallons a day is enough to fill about 90 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Nomenco also has an on-site laboratory that analyzes samples each day using state-of-the-art equipment to ensure permit compliance. So this year, we actually achieved and were awarded the NACWA Platinum Peak Performance Award, which is given to us for 22 years of consecutive permit compliance. All right, now I'm going to talk about some of the changes that were made from 1970 when Nomenco went into service until the current day. And I'm going to relate those through a study that we do on Gunston Cove, so we can see how differences in wastewater treatment can in fact give you a better water quality in the receiving rivers. So Gunston Cove is a freshwater embayment of the tidal Potomac River. So if you look at the map, Nomenco's at the top corner there. We do discharge into Pohick Creek, like mentioned. Pohick Creek will lead you to Pohick Bay. Pohick Bay goes to Gunston Cove, which ultimately leads into the Potomac River or the Chesapeake Bay. So Pohick Creek and the other arm of the map you see there is called Aquatic Creek. Those are the two contributing waterways into Gunston Cove. And our effluent, or our treated wastewater from Nomenco, actually is a large contributor to the Pohick Creek side of this. So in 1980, our wastewater management established a volunteer water quality monitoring program. So the program was part of an environmental stewardship initiative. The goal was to try and evaluate. So since the late 1970s, Nomenco was moving toward upgrading to be an advanced treatment plant. And they were proactive in trying for that nutrient removal, that nitrogen and phosphorus. What this study was, what this water quality monitoring program was to look at, was to determine what are the effects and what extent do the changes that we make impact how much cleaner or how much better the water quality is in Gunston Cove. So we're trying to correlate any upgrades or changes in wastewater treatment to what we see in the cove. And so in 1980, we established that volunteer program. But in 1984, we actually started partnering with George Mason University. And this study is now called the Ecological Study of Gunston Cove. And it's been going on for over 35 years. When the study began in 84, the cove was in trouble. You know, there was very low submerged aquatic vegetation. You saw periodic fish kills. The water quality was not good, not what we want to see, and it did not support a lot of aquatic life. It also had a significant amount of blue-green algal blooms that showed up there, which was a big indicator of advanced stages of eutrophication. So there was a lot of parameters that are studied throughout this ecological study with partnership with George Mason University. I'm going to touch on 4 of them. I'm going to look at water clarity, the nutrients, the nitrogen and phosphorus, submerged aquatic vegetation, and aquatic life, and see if we can relate them to some of the changes and upgrades in the wastewater treatment plants. So the first 2 we're going to kind of look at. All right. There we go. The first 2 we're going to look at for the study are nutrients and water quality. I'm kind of putting these together, not only because some of the changes and upgrades in the plant system were done at the same time, but also because improvements in these parameters seem to have an impact on, of course, the positive effects on whether you have submerged aquatic vegetation or SAV and the aquatic fish that will be present. So over the course of this study, over the 35 years, the nutrient loading decreased by an order of magnitude. So looking at our nutrients is a real clear example that we can see on how treatment processes and advanced treatment processes can help improve that water quality in the receiving rivers and streams. All right, so a quick little through time here, looking at our timeline. We have in 1978, Nomen Coal completed its first step in becoming an advanced treatment plant. When it did that, it put 2 upgrades in. One of them was adding chemical process to remove the phosphorus. So if you look at the chart we have here, the pink line is your phosphorus, and you can see in 1980 it was still pretty high. We don't know what it was before that, when the processes were changed in 78, but it's still relatively high. But over the next 4 or 5 years, that phosphorus really decreased a lot as a result of the Nomen Coal plant having this chemical process put in place to remove that phosphorus. Today, that process occurs in our tertiary clarifiers, which is on your the picture on your top left corner of the screen there. For our tertiary clarifiers, this is part of our advanced processes. Ferric chloride is added to the wastewater. As the wastewater moves through those clarifiers, the ferric chloride combines with phosphorus, other solids, some microorganisms might be in there. As all those things combine or flock together, as we call this, they sink to the bottom. They become heavy and sink to the bottom, removing them from the wastewater that continues on in the process. Another upgrade done in 78 was to add a multi-filtration system, which removes the sediment. That goes to that turbidity that was talked about by Emily, and helping to decrease that in the final effluent. In 2003, Nomen Coal then introduced, well, first of all, they expanded to their current capacity of 67 million gallons a day. And we added the new biological nutrient removal system. This is called our activated sludge tanks, or ASTs, which is the middle picture there. So in the activated sludge tanks, what happens is we're reducing the ammonia nitrogen levels to near non-detect. The way that it works is it has 2 processes. There's aerated tanks, as Emily mentioned, and there's also non-aerated tanks. And those 2 processes allow microorganisms that either need free oxygen or not to break down ammonia into nitrites and nitrates, and then from nitrites and nitrates into your nitrogen gas, removing it from your process. Okay, so if you take a look at 2003 on the graph, again, you can see that there are still significant decreases coming down from 2003, where when we introduced the biological nutrient removal system, removing a lot of that nitrogen. Again, in 2010, in order to meet the enhanced nutrient removal requirements for Nomen Coal, they started constructing the moving bed biofilm reactors. So MBBR, moving bed biofilm reactors. This reduced our nitrogen levels to the lowest levels ever, which is less than 3 milligrams per liter. This is an anoxic biological process, basically meaning we're not adding free oxygen to it. It uses small plastic media in the shape of wagon wheels or pasta wheels, microorganisms, and supplemental carbon. So the plastic media gives the microorganisms a surface area on which they can grow, and the supplemental carbon acts as the food source for them. So again, if we look at our chart in 2010, nitrogen levels continued to decrease after the implementation of this MBBR process. Additionally, Nomen Coal has reclaimed water initiatives. So in 2008 and 2010, they started this initiative where treated effluent was then used as reclaimed water. And what that means is originally in 2008, that reclaimed water could be used for irrigation on the Nomen Coal property. In 2010, we formalized the reuse program, and now it's actually used up to 500 million gallons of reclaimed water, or the treated effluent, goes to an industrial facility, and 24 million gallons goes to ball fields and golf courses for their irrigation. This helps us in several ways. First, it keeps even trace amounts of nutrients out of the receiving rivers or streams that we're putting it into, and also that little bit of nutrient is not a bad thing for when you're looking at irrigation. Okay, so now looking at the submerged aquatic vegetation, the SAV and aquatic life. So again, this is in Gunston Cove. If you look at the first picture of Gunston Cove there, that's in 1984. It's kind of hard to read, it's a little blurry. It's in 1984. The SAV coverage is almost non-existent. You don't really see a whole lot there. This is where things were starting. We didn't have a lot of that because of that nutrients being so high and the water clarity being lower than it needed to be. So it couldn't support the submerged aquatic vegetation growing. So these, you can see that over time, the next one is 1995 and then 2005. So about 10-year gaps in between each one. And you can see that that SAV is definitely returning and it's continuing to increase over the study period. Additionally, with the return of SAV, we have the alewife fish that's disappeared. It was originally in the cove until the cove has lost some of its ability to support aquatic life. And as things started improving again, it did come back. It returned when we implemented the biological nutrient removal system, or the ASTs. It came back shortly thereafter. And as this fish population increases, it also increases the bald eagle population in the area. As well as we have the return of freshwater mussels that disappeared because of their sensitivity to nitrogen, but throughout the study, as those nitrogen levels have decreased, these freshwater mussels have been able to come back. So each of these parameters, the lower nutrients, higher submerged aquatic vegetation, more fish species, return of the bald eagles, all of these are showing the clear improvements on the water quality in Gunston Cove and the positive impacts that those upgrades and changes in Fairfax County's wastewater management provided. All right, we're going to change to a little different focus. Now that looked a lot at the treatment plant and things that were changing in the treatment process. Now we're going to take a step back and we're going to look at some of the collection system. So collection system is sometimes thought of even less than treatment because it's not a big building or a big place you can go and tour. But these are all of the pipes and pump stations that are underground that convey your water from your home or business to the wastewater treatment plant. Again, we have over 3,300 miles of collections pipes in Fairfax County. If you put them end to end, that would be enough pipe to go from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States. They also have over 95,000 sanitary sewer manholes and 63 pump stations that are managed throughout the county. So what I want to do first is I want to take a little look here at the extensive preventative maintenance program that's in place in Fairfax County's collection system. And this is in place to help maintain the integrity of that infrastructure, making sure that we're keeping everything running as smoothly and as best as possible to help protect the human health and the environment. Each of these examples is going to lead to what we have as a positive success in our number of overflows or backups. Overflows and backups, of course, means that wastewater is now getting into the environment, and we don't want that to happen. So Fairfax County has a 0.73 overflow or backup per 100-mile occurrence rate. This is significantly lower than the mean value of 4.3 occurrences per 100 miles that was established in a study by the Water Environmental Federation. So their 4.3 is their median, we're at 0.73. And how does that happen? Well, we have a couple different groups examples I'll show here. The first one is our closed circuit television or CCTV crews. And I'm just going to go clockwise around these pictures. So these crews go out with their specialized CCTVs and they inspect all of the pipes in Fairfax County. They're looking for any problems or potential problems that could cause the sewer systems to either back up or cause problems into the environment. If they find a problem, They then report that to the sewer maintenance group. The sewer maintenance group is a team that goes out, they'll inspect it, they'll pressure wash it, get any clogs out of there, get that system back up and running the way it needs to be, any clogs out of there so that we don't have any problems. What they're doing is they're helping prevent, both of these together are helping prevent backups or overflows that can stem from improperly disposed of items. Emily mentioned wastewater treatment plants. Wastewater is designed to remove human waste and toilet paper. All those other things that are put down there can cause problems. So this is improperly disposed of items down sinks and toilets, as well as possible tree roots or other causes. All right, our pump station groups. So this is the pump station teams, of course, go out and they're looking at each of the pump stations every week, trying to make sure that there's no problems. Our pump stations are located in low-lying areas. Their function, or what they do, wastewater generally moves through our wastewater collection system using gravity. That's good. It means we're not using any energy. There's not a lot of things that can break, but you can't always go downhill. So pump stations are at the bottom in these low-lying areas to move our wastewater back up to a higher elevation into another gravity sewer line where it can continue on to the wastewater treatment plant. But because they are located in these low-lying areas, they're like a collection point for all these items we talked about. These things that can cause damage to the pumps, and if they make it past the pumps, to things that happen in the wastewater treatment plant. So you have things like your trash, your dental floss, the so-called flushable wipes, fats, oils, and grease, anything that ends up down there that shouldn't be. So there's teams of mechanics, electricians, and instrumentation personnel that all work to help prevent these overflows. And our last is our trouble response. Our trouble response center, they're always there 24 hours a day, receiving calls on problems people see. Residents can call it in, hey, I see a problem, something's going on here. They will dispatch the correct crew, they'll go out, evaluate it, and correct the problem as soon as possible. All right, so that's their everyday work. But there's always process improvements we're doing as we go along. And this is one example that relates really closely to the water quality in our local creeks and streams. This is called the Comprehensive Sanitary Sewer Creek Crossing Inspection Program. This is a program that's still in process of being designed with our collection system. But in Fairfax County, there are over 6,000 locations where the gravity sewer lines will cross creeks or streams. Why? Because we use gravity to move wastewater, just like rivers and streams are going to flow downhill to lower lying areas, right? So there's 6,000 locations where these pipelines will cross. The overlapping proximity of the waterways and their kind of backwoods or remote locations can make it harder or take a longer time in order to be able to locate the problem and to control it. So the concerns with these areas, with these creek crossings, it's increasing, and it's increasing with the development in the area, climate changes, and recent storm events. Like in 2018, we had more storm events and more significant storm events than we've had in the past. So these all lead to erosion of the creek and stream banks underneath, leaving the pipelines exposed, like you see in the pictures on the slide. So what is this program going to do? Well, it's going to look at potential risk, right? It's going to look at risk of overflows based on factors such as the pipe size, what material it is, what condition it's currently in, when was it built. It's also going to look at characteristics of the area around it, the land characteristics, the stream characteristics. And if that pipe fails, is it going to cause environmental, public health, or social ramifications? So this risk model is being developed. Once it's developed, they'll test it on about 300 of these crossings. Then somebody will physically go out and they will confirm the accuracy with an inspection. Once they know that that risk model is working correctly, it'll be expanded to the 6,000 locations, and they'll know which ones to prioritize based on risk and be able to go out and correct the problems before it actually causes a problem. This is a really great example of the continuous improvements that go on in Fairfax County and the proactive approach to making sure that we're protecting our environment. So as a real quick wrap up, I'll tell you that, so those are all the things our treatment and collection systems do. These are the ways we try and help protect human health and the environment. But what else do? We don't stop there. We like to try and make sure people know, right? We want to educate and inform people about what they can do or how they can learn more about different processes. So going clockwise real quick, this is all the most effective weapon against pollution is prevention through education. Many people don't know. You don't think about wastewater. You don't think about where it goes. You're not intentionally trying to go out and cause problems. We just don't know. So things we do is we participate in the Chesapeake Bay Foundation Grasses for the Masses. And we go out and plant there so that we're showing the importance of restoring the SAV. The next slides over are showing some public outreach events where we go bring educational materials and activities that can be done with the kids to help teach them about water quality and about protecting our wastewater infrastructure. As Emily mentioned, I like to do some of the plant tours. These are pictures of our plant tours going on. You can sign up for plant tours on our websites, and we do them with the schools. There's high schools, middle schools. We've had as young as the 6th graders. Scout tours come through. We also have community plant tours that go on that you can sign up for. The bottom picture there is a picture of every year we participate in creek cleanups around our area. And so Noman Cole, Fairfax County Wastewater Management, is a participant in this. So we're showing people that we do what we're asking everybody else to do. Lastly, we spend a lot of time educating about the recycling of water. Water's never used once. It's going to be used again. It has been used again. We do the best we can to protect it and make sure that the water quality remains for future generations. And we do a lot of this through educations in schools, as well as just informing about information such as the recycling of water. That is all I have for the wastewater treatment in Fairfax County.
All right. Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Emily. We've got time now for some questions and answers. We've got about 10 minutes left. So if you have any questions that kind of popped in your mind as we had Emily and Melissa talking, go ahead and submit them in the question box. We have gotten a few already. And Melissa, I think most of these are probably geared towards you
Sure.
as our designated expert for the day. So we had somebody ask, we had a couple people ask about tertiary processes, and someone was asking if you guys have tertiary treatment that addresses chemicals such as pesticides or household chemicals. And are they, if you do, or even if you don't, are they regularly upgraded to filter out more harmful chemicals?
So there are processes to remove chemicals. One of the biggest messages we like to make sure people understand is that things like your pesticides or your chemicals, those are considered our household hazardous waste. And sorry about that. If you want to stop sharing my screen too, Zach, I think we'll be okay there too. But
Okay,
those are things that if they go into the wastewater system, they can cause a lot of problems. They cause a lot of problems with the pipes as well as with the treatment process. So hazardous chemicals in the system can not only corrode pipes depending on what they're made of, but if it makes it to the treatment process, Emily mentioned those microorganisms, those that bacteria that we use, and it can kill them, which means that the process is not going to work like it does. So it is a big message that we put out there. Household chemicals do not belong down there. Are there ways of removing them? Of course, the system will remove other things other than the specifics of what it's intended to. But as the population increases, as people add more pollutants to the wastewater system, it's harder and harder to remove all of that. The more there is, the more you have to remove. So although it can be removed, will it all be? I can't answer that. And if more and more people put it down, it's definitely not going to allow the system to work the way it needs to.
You talked kind of early on in your presentation about a volunteer plan. Someone asked, does that mean by volunteers, does that mean it's not required by law or it's done by volunteers?
Oh, it means that it was not required by law that we do it. That said, if anybody wants to volunteer for doing stuff around here, let me know. We've got opportunities for that also.
Awesome. You kind of talked a little bit about it towards the end. Someone was asking if you have programs to educate households about what should and shouldn't be put down the drain, such as chemicals, drugs, foods, paper products, etc.
We do. Our three big messages, I guess four if you include the household hazardous waste, but our big ones that we focus on are fats, oils, and grease. The flushable wipes, which are not flushable and cause all sorts of problems, especially right now in the world that we're living in, and our medications, and making sure people understand the proper ways of disposal, where they can go to properly dispose for like medications and stuff, instead of putting those things down your toilets and sinks. We do have information on our website that has a lot of this. I also partner with, I'm part of a group for the regional metropolitan Washington area, and we have a website called Protect Your Pipes. And a lot of the information is on their website also, where you can find information on why these products and why these things are going to cause problems to wastewater treatment plants.
Okay, we had somebody also ask if asking about the mussels that had returned that you mentioned, and they were asking if there's data available on the return of freshwater mussels.
So that ecological study, I touched on it really briefly because George Mason University, they do the bulk of the data analysis and collecting of the data. So we go out and we monitor it, we financially support the program. They do a lot of the speaking to it and the presenting on it. Every year we'll have a report that they give us, and that report can be found in full on our website under the I think if you just Google, or if you search for just Gunston Cove or Ecological Study of Gunston Cove, you should have the report that pops up. That will give you all those details.
Somebody kind of more of a comment than a question just said, kind of related to the 2 questions ago, they said they also have a household hazardous waste collection process by their solid waste operations to minimize disposal through sewers.
Yes, so we do have, like, for bulk amount of oil, so if you have like a big container of oil that needs to be gotten rid of or something, they do take that back at the solid waste transfer stations in Fairfax County. So if you go onto the Fairfax County solid waste site, it tells you the different ways that you can get rid of their household hazardous waste. They manage a lot of that, and so you'll find that on their site.
Someone's asking if you're allowing water treatment facility tours currently, I'm guessing with COVID-19 precautions.
Yeah, right now we're not. There's talk about trying to do like a virtual type tour like this, where I'd be walking around, but you know, people can't really ask questions or really experience it. At this point, they've been put on hold. I am hoping that by the fall it'll be opened back up again. We just might have to minimize the number of people that can come on each tour at that time.
And this is actually a question I had. What is the expected lifespan of a sewage pipe before it needs to be repaired or replaced?
That's a great question. So I don't know the exact answers to that. I can tell you this. Since things have started in 1970 until now, there are different materials that are being used for sewer pipes. You know, we learn as we go along that things that should change or what can cause problems. And so they're using different materials. Those different materials are going to last different amount of time. Right now, actually, at the end of this month, Noman Coal is going to be celebrating 50 years of being in service. And so it's a large infrastructure. There's a lot going on. They're maintaining it best they can, but things will break down and you will need to replace some of that infrastructure. And that's just all part of the process of just prolonging the life as much as you can, but not to the point where it compromises human health or the environment.
And I don't know if this is within your scope of knowledge, but someone asked if you can elaborate on whether the return of submerged aquatic vegetation is attributed to a decrease in nutrient load or sediment load as well. I'm guessing like within the water.
So I can speak to it a little, to what I know. Again, you will find the exacts of what they find in the report. So the nutrient load, because it causes the eutrophication, is going to make it so that the submerged aquatic vegetation cannot survive, right? They don't have, as things start decaying and decomposing, it's not going to support life. As well as the water clarity, that turbidity. If the sunlight can't get down to the plants at the bottom, they're not going to be able to grow. So removing the nutrients and removing those sediments that are causing that turbidity is going to allow those submerged aquatic vegetation to come back and start to be able to survive in the environment. There are other things that are going to affect how much SAV that you'll find in a year. For example, in 2018, when we had massive storms that were more flooding everywhere than we're used to in this area, you know, we're not used to being able to manage the streams, not we, Nome Cole, but the streams, the environment. That's not what they're used to. And so there's a lot of flooding, there's a lot of overflowing, there's a lot of sediment that gets churned up into the waters, and the submerged aquatic vegetation has a harder time surviving in those environments also. So it is impacted by environmental factors such as that, as well as just your normal everyday, if pollutants are getting in from basic runoff.
And I know you mentioned a little bit about this, but can you maybe speak more to how you attempt to reduce sewage overflows after large rain events?
So we do not have a combined sewer. I meant to mention that after Emily's presentation, but Fairfax County has separate stormwater versus wastewater. So if I actually can go back, right? So if I go back to this recycled water photo here, everyone can still see that, right? Zach?
I'll make it a presenter again.
Zach needs to share your screen.
Yep.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so if I go back to my recycled water, it's pretty small, but this is how Fairfax County works. I do have wastewater and stormwater separate. You'll see it's kind of hard to read. But at the top, you have your houses lead to that wastewater treatment plant. That is only wastewater. Underneath that, in the bottom right-hand corner of that little graphic, that's your stormwater. So our stormwater systems collect all of the water that goes into storm drains or runs directly off into our rivers and streams, and it channels it right into the local waterways. The same local waterways that our treated effluent would go in. There are going to be some issues with stream or with storms, even from a wastewater perspective. You know, you do have some infiltration where the stormwater gets into the systems just because of the heavy rainfalls and stuff. And that does increase capacity. There are controls in place for that. I mentioned we generally work at about 40 million gallons a day. That's what we treat on a general capacity here at Nome Cole. We are able to manage 67 million gallons a day. So that gives us a little leeway in itself. And then on top of it, if more flow comes in, there are large storage tanks that are on site. Water can be deferred to there until we catch up, and then it can be managed. So there's never been a problem with not being able to manage the wastewater that comes into the Nome Cole with the separate sewer system like that.
I just wanted to add one more thing about combined sewer overflows. One big update that a lot of cities with older systems have done is that they've built much larger combined sewer overflows that can handle that overflow water and basically release it further away from the part of the river or ocean where people recreate in. So it was pretty big news recently in DC, maybe that was last year, about them building a really large combined sewer overflow pipe that has helped make the Anacostia River cleaner. So it is literally pushing the pollution further downstream, but these are efforts that a lot of larger cities are taking to protect their local waterways.
Awesome. Well, looks like our hour is expired and questions have kind of slowed down. So I think this is a good opportunity to just end our webinar. And I will say thank you very much to Emily, and thank you especially to our guest speaker, Melissa, today. Hopefully everyone in the audience feels like you guys got something valuable out of this. So go ahead and email us if you have further questions, or if you want us to get you in touch with Melissa. Our email is sos@iwla.org. And the recording for this will be sent out in a follow-up email to you guys, and it'll be posted on our Isaac Walton League YouTube channel. So keep an eye out for that. And thanks again, everybody, for joining us. And thank you, Melissa and Emily.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zach.